At 5:47 a.m., I woke to pounding on my door and the chemical sting of paint already in my throat. I stepped outside and froze. Every solar panel on my roof glowed a sickly chalk white under the dawn paint dripping into my gutters like melted plastic. 10 seconds later, I checked the network. Our neighborhood security hub was limping on backup, my batteries throttling down a hard countdown to zero, already ticking 71 hours 59 minutes, and falling. The person who'd spent 8 years preaching aesthetic harmony had just blinded every camera in Maple Ridge Estates. Her name is Evelyn Pierce, our HOA president. She called my panels an eyesore. She had no idea they were the heartbeat of our safety. Before the sun fully cleared the pines, 3 houses were hit. That's when I realized this wasn't about looks. It was about leverage, and someone was cashing in. Before we dive in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I moved to Maple Ridge Estates for peace and quiet, a fresh start after years buried in city contracts and endless IT consulting gigs. The neighborhood looked like something out of a brochure: tidy cul-de-sacs, trimmed hedges, and the faint hum of sprinklers at dawn. What they didn't show in the photos was the self-appointed queen who ruled it all, Evelyn Pierce. She had been HOA president for 8 straight years, her pastel blazers and clipped smile plastered on every community newsletter like a brand logo. Her husband Harold was a real estate attorney with the kind of grin that never reached his eyes. Together they ran the HOA as if it were a private company, and the rest of us were just tenants on their land. When I installed my solar panels, I honestly thought I was doing something good. The system was professional-grade photovoltaic modules with a lithium-ion battery array feeding both my house and the community security hub I'd helped modernize. The old CCTV network had constant outages, so 6 months earlier I volunteered to upgrade it and even covered part of the cost myself. My panels powered that hub during blackouts. I told myself it was an investment in safety, not a rebellion. Then one Tuesday morning, the doorbell rang like a distress signal. Through my office window, I saw Evelyn standing on my porch, arms crossed, her expression carved from polished granite. Behind her, sunlight flashed off my new panels, sleek, efficient, and apparently offensive. "Mr. Cole," she began before I could speak, "those things on your roof are unacceptable. They violate the visual harmony of Maple Ridge Estates." I blinked. "You mean the solar panels?" Her lips tightened. "I mean the industrial eyesores, turning your home into a warehouse. Our neighborhood upholds a certain image, and that image does not include reflective metal sheets glaring into my living room." I had dealt with clients like her people who equated authority with infallibility. So I stayed calm. "Mrs. Pierce, they're legal. I've got city permits, HOA notification receipts, even the inspection sign-off. The panels meet state standards and frankly reduce our shared energy costs. They're powering the backup grid for the security cameras." She waved her manicured hand as though swatting at a fly. "Spare me the technicalities. The HOA board hasn't approved any such alteration. You have 30 days to remove them or face fines." Her perfume lingered after she left, sharp and synthetic like burnt plastic. I shut the door and exhaled slowly. I'd seen power trips before, but this felt personal. Something about her confidence, her tone suggested she knew she could make trouble stick. That night I started digging. Public records were easy enough to access: meeting minutes, property sales, disciplinary letters. A pattern formed like a glitch on a screen. Over the past 8 years, 12 households had left Maple Ridge, all after aesthetic violations: mismatched shutters, unapproved fences, a doghouse painted non-neutral beige. Each home had been bought soon after by a company named Summit Vista Development. Harold Pierce's law firm had represented them in at least 5 of those transactions. I leaned back in my chair, the glow from my monitor throwing harsh light across the room. "She's not protecting property values," I muttered. "She's flipping them." The next afternoon, my friend and neighbor Jorge Alvarez stopped by. He was a retired Army sergeant with the steady patience of someone who'd seen worse than HOA meetings. "Heard she came after you," he said, dropping 2 beers on my porch table. "You planning to fight?" I nodded. "Legally, she can't ban solar energy in Colorado. There's a state statute 383-0168, solar access rights. It overrides HOA nonsense." Jorge chuckled. "You sound like my wife when she quotes parking codes." His face turned serious. "Just be careful. Evelyn's not used to losing. Last year she fined a family for hanging Christmas lights too early. They moved out by spring. That evening I noticed her white Mercedes circle my block twice before dusk. She slowed each time near my driveway, phone pressed to her ear. When she passed a third time, I caught fragments of her voice through the open window. "Yes, Tomorrow morning at 5. Make it permanent. Permanent. The word settled like ice in my stomach. I activated every safeguard I had: cloud backups, redundant storage for the doorbell footage, encrypted timestamps. My work laptop ran scripts to log any motion near my property between midnight and sunrise. Years in cybersecurity had taught me one rule: trust the system, not the people. 2 days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. The HOA letterhead was embossed in gold foil, as if luxury could mask intimidation. Emergency aesthetic review meeting, attendance mandatory. It was scheduled that same evening at the Pierce residence, their mansion perched on a hill like a courthouse. I arrived early, laptop under my arm, dressed neatly enough to remind her I wasn't intimidated. Inside, the place reeked of expensive candles and control. Dozens of neighbors filled the marble living room, whispering under the chandelier that probably cost more than my entire installation. Evelyn stood at the front beside a projector screen, her posture a sermon of superiority. "Thank you all for coming," she began with a sugary smile. "Tonight we address a matter threatening the integrity of our neighborhood." With a click, the screen displayed distorted photos of my roof, edited to look like a scrapyard. The title read, "Solar Blight, a Case Study in Negligence." Murmurs spread. I saw Jorge roll his eyes in the back row. "These panels," Evelyn continued, laser pointer slicing through the air, "reflect sunlight into neighboring windows, disrupt our visual cohesion, and diminish property values by up to 15%. I raised a hand. According to what study? She hesitated one beat too long. "It's common sense." I stepped forward, plugged my laptop into the projector, and replaced her slide with my own data: local energy reports, carbon offset metrics, real estate analyses showing homes with solar integration appreciating faster, not slower. Then I showed the community camera network diagram how my solar array provided the emergency power that kept those cameras running during last month's outage. Silence. Then whispers. One neighbor nodded. Another muttered, "Didn't know that." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "You had no authorization to connect private equipment to HOA systems." Actually, a calm voice said from the side, "He did." Sophie Nguyen, a young attorney who'd moved in recently, stood holding a binder of HOA bylaws. Section 7C allows member contributions to community infrastructure if approved by the maintenance subcommittee. Mr. Cole's submission, email, and receipt were filed properly. And per state law, the HOA cannot impose restrictions that effectively prohibit solar energy installations. Gasps rippled through the room. Evelyn's mask cracked. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Maple Ridge will not look like a science fair project." I unplugged the laptop and met her glare. "No, Mrs. Pierce. It's going to look like a community that finally works." But as I left that mansion glowing behind me like a theater set, I couldn't shake the feeling that the curtain hadn't fallen yet, it had just risen. 2 days after the heated HOA meeting, the neighborhood felt different. Maple Ridge Estates was normally the kind of place where you could set your watch by the sound of sprinklers at dawn, but that Thursday morning the air felt tense, still like static before a storm. Evelyn's Mercedes wasn't parked in her driveway. Instead, a white van with the logo Front Range Coatings sat there, engine idling. I recognized it instantly. It was her brother-in-law's company. When I stepped outside to get my mail, the driver, a bulky man in overalls, shot me a look before speeding away. Something about the way he avoided eye contact made my gut twist. I opened the HOA bulletin that had arrived in my mailbox, hoping it might contain an apology or clarification after the farce of that meeting. Instead, the headline screamed, "Solar panels deemed unsafe, Community Standards Committee to review emergency measures." Below it was a statement signed by Evelyn herself. "While we appreciate innovation, unauthorized electrical systems may pose hazards to neighboring homes. The HOA will be inspecting the installation and taking appropriate action." In other words, she wasn't backing down. That night I sat at my desk combing through HOA records again, this time digging deeper. With Sophie's legal mind guiding me over the phone, we followed the paper trail. Payments, meeting minutes, subcontractor invoices, they all pointed toward the same pattern. Front Range Coatings had received nearly $40,000 over the last 3 years from HOA maintenance funds, yet not a single member, including me, could recall any such work being done. Jorge came over just before midnight, bringing his usual calm energy and a flash drive. "You'll want to see this," he said. My wife couldn't sleep. She was up late grading papers and saw Evelyn walking around your side yard with a flashlight. He handed me footage from his backyard security camera. Sure enough, at 1:37 p.m., Evelyn's silhouette appeared, robe slippers, and a small notepad in hand, scribbling something under the moonlight while pointing toward my panels. Documenting her next excuse, I muttered. We spent the next few hours planning how to defend ourselves if she tried anything drastic. Sophie joined our call via video chat, sipping cold coffee under fluorescent office lights. Legally, Nathan, you're in the right, but people like her win by intimidation. If she's tied to that development company, she has a motive: force you out, tank your property value, let Summit Vista scoop it up cheap. Then we expose it, I said. Sophie nodded slowly. Yes, but we need proof. Hard evidence. By sunrise, I'd installed 2 additional cameras, one facing the street, another on the roofline directly above my solar array. Every frame backed up to a private server outside the HOA's jurisdiction. I thought I was being paranoid. But paranoia turned out to be survival instinct. 3 days later, the first strike landed. It was a quiet Sunday morning. I was debugging a client's network from my home office when the doorbell exploded with rapid chimes. Through the window, I saw Evelyn again, this time flanked by 2 men I didn't recognize. One carried a clipboard, the other a camera. I opened the door cautiously. Mr. Cole, she announced, her voice bright and brittle. These gentlemen are from the Community Safety and Compliance Division. I arched an eyebrow. Never heard of that division. It's a temporary committee I've authorized to inspect potential hazards. Please step aside. I didn't move, not without a city permit. The man with the clipboard shifted awkwardly. Ma'am, we really should. Evelyn shot him a glare sharp enough to slice glass. We'll proceed. I'm the HOA president. That's authorization enough. I smiled faintly. Actually, it isn't. I reached into my folder and pulled out a printed copy of the Colorado Revised Statutes 3830168, highlighting the clause Sophie had cited. State law protects solar installations from unreasonable interference by HOAs. Unless you're an electrical inspector certified by the municipality you're trespassing. The man with the clipboard looked relieved. Let's go, Mrs. Pierce, he muttered. This isn't worth it. They left without another word, but Evelyn lingered, her fake smile fading into something venomous. You think you're clever, she hissed. But I've been president here longer than you've owned this house. You'll learn your place, maybe, I said. But it won't be under you. That was the last conversation we had before everything went to hell. That night, the neighborhood power flickered 3 times between midnight and 1. My UPS systems kicked in flawlessly, but when I checked the logs the next morning, I found something odd, an unexplained connection attempt to the NVR hub at 1242 a.m. from an unauthorized MAC address. Someone had tried to access the security camera network remotely. I called Sophie. Could the HOA even legally touch that server? No, she replied. Only you and the city technician have credentials. Unless someone spoofed your IP, her voice trailed off. We both knew who had the motive. Monday afternoon, Jorge texted me a photo. Evelyn's Mercedes parked in front of Summit Vista Development's downtown office building. The caption read, "Told you she's got connections." The next 24 hours crawled. I could feel something building like a system overheating. At 2:17 a.m., my motion sensor app pinged multiple detections near the side of the house. I checked the live feed, nothing but darkness and faint movement. Probably raccoons, I told myself. But when dawn broke, I smelled it, the acrid sting of solvent, before I even stepped outside. Every inch of my roof glistened white. Paint dripped like wax down the shingles, pooling onto the driveway. My solar panels, $30,000 worth, were suffocating under industrial enamel. I remember the silence. No birds, no wind, just the sound of thick liquid sliding off glass. My first instinct was to run to my control hub. The screens confirmed my fear: the system was offline. The neighborhood cameras were draining backup batteries, fast ticking down from 72 hours to 0. Evelyn had done it. She'd blinded the entire neighborhood. I called the police, but the responding officer treated it like a neighborly spat. File an insurance claim, he said, snapping a few half-hearted photos. After he left, I checked my doorbell footage, black spray paint across the lens. They'd thought of everything. Jorge arrived minutes later, his face grim. My wife saw a white van around 3 a.m. Front range coatings again. I got the plate. We cross-referenced it online. It matched the company's registry. Proof, finally. But that night, as I scrubbed paint flakes from my hands, I saw Evelyn's porch light flicker on across the street. She stood there in her robe, sipping tea, smiling faintly, as if admiring a finished painting. I whispered to myself, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Because this wasn't just vandalism, it was sabotage. And I was done playing by her rules. The morning after the vandalism, Maple Ridge Estates didn't look like the pristine neighborhood it used to be. Beneath the perfect lawns and white picket fences, something ugly had surfaced: fear, gossip, and the metallic tang of betrayal. By 8 a.m., half the neighborhood knew what had happened. Someone had painted over my solar panels in the middle of the night, shutting down not just my home's power system, but the entire grid that supplied the community's security cameras. People gathered on their driveways, whispering. Some offered sympathetic looks. Others glanced away as if afraid to be associated with me. HOA politics was contagious that way. Evelyn Pierce's silver Mercedes sat in her driveway, again, spotless as ever, her windows drawn. I'd already called my insurance company, filed a police report, and sent an email to the city's code enforcement office attaching everything I had: the white residue samples, the partial tire tracks on my driveway, and the plate number from the van Jorge had captured. But deep down, I knew none of that would be enough. Evelyn's family had friends in the police department, lawyers, in her husband's firm, and a reputation for twisting narratives. Still, I wasn't the type to roll over. I spent the next hours doing what I did best: documenting, compiling, building a digital trail. My network server had recorded partial logs of late-night activity, including one unusual ping at 3:02 a.m. from a device previously connected to the HOA's office Wi-Fi. The MAC address ended with 43.9 amperes DD. When I cross-checked it against prior network scans, it matched a device registered under PiercePad, Evelyn's iPad. That was my first solid connection. Jorge stopped by later that morning, coffee in hand, his military posture rigid with frustration. "You sure you don't want me to talk to her husband?" "No," I said, scanning my laptop. "We need proof. Talking won't fix anything. I want this to burn her reputation from the inside out legally." He nodded, though I could see his jaw clench. "My wife's furious. The neighborhood group chat's blowing up. Evelyn's claiming your panels malfunctioned and leaked paint, and that she's just trying to handle a safety issue." I laughed bitterly. So now, I vandalized myself. Classic Karen defense. He sat down across from me. "We're going to fix this. But first you need allies." That word allies hit me harder than I expected. For months I'd worked on my projects alone, trusting systems, not people. But this time the system was against me. That afternoon Sophie Wynn arrived. Dressed in a navy suit, heels clicking on my driveway, she looked more like a prosecutor than a neighbor. She carried a stack of folders thick enough to break a table leg. "Nathan," she said, stepping inside, "I think it's time you saw what I've been collecting." At my kitchen table, she laid everything out. HOA, financial statements, board meeting, transcripts, email printouts, even whistleblower letters that someone had anonymously sent to her law office. "Evelyn's been rerouting HOA maintenance funds for years," she explained. "Mostly to Front Range Coatings and a shell company tied to her husband's firm. Payments disguised as landscape restoration or decorative repair." Guess what? None of those projects ever happened. I scrolled through one of her documents on my laptop. "And the developer?" She nodded. "Summit Vista Development. They've been quietly buying up foreclosed homes at below market prices, almost every one of them previously involved in HOA violations. The pattern is airtight. It's organized property flipping through intimidation." Jorge leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing. "That's not just corruption, that's racketeering." Sophie smiled grimly. "Exactly what I was thinking." But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Jorge's son, Liam, 11 years old, sharp as a tack, always tinkering with his iPad, came into the room holding his tablet. "Mr. Cole," he said, "I think I saw something last week when I was recording fireflies for my science project." He opened a video file timestamped 2 nights before the vandalism. From the view through his bedroom window, Evelyn's garage was visible. In the dim glow, she was standing there with her phone pressed to her ear. The audio wasn't perfect, but her voice was unmistakable. "Make sure his cameras are down first. I don't want any footage. Cover every inch of those panels. And for God's sake, make it look random, not professional." Sophie froze. "Please tell me you saved this." Liam nodded proudly. "It's on the cloud, too. My dad helped me set it up." I exhaled, half in disbelief, half in relief. This is it. The smoking gun. That night, we formed a plan. Sophie would compile the evidence for law enforcement and the HOA audit committee. Jorge would rally neutral neighbors, people tired of Evelyn's control but too afraid to speak up, and I'd prepare a presentation to expose her in the one place she couldn't hide: a public HOA meeting. We didn't have to wait long. Evelyn called an emergency assembly for the next evening, claiming system failure and community risk. The invitation came through email, dripping with performative concern. We must discuss the danger of unauthorized technology endangering our residents. When I arrived, the community center was packed. Dozens of neighbors filled the room, their voices low and uneasy. Evelyn stood at the podium wearing a crisp white suit, the kind of armor people wear when they expect applause. As many of you know, she began our neighborhood security system failed this week due to unsafe personal modifications. Mr. Cole's unauthorized solar setup caused a power surge that damaged our camera network. Unfortunately, while he may have had good intentions, his negligence put us all at risk. She paused dramatically, letting the murmurs rise. Then she added, I am motioning for a full ban on individual solar installations and a $5,000 fine to cover community damages. I stood slowly, heart pounding. Actually, I said, plugging my laptop into the projector, the cameras didn't fail, they were sabotaged. Evelyn's painted smile twitched. Excuse me, I hit play. Liam's video filled the screen. Evelyn's unmistakable voice, echoing through the speakers. Make sure his cameras are down first. Cover every inch. The room went silent. For a moment, even Evelyn froze, her face drained of color. Then came the whispers. The collective gasp of a community realizing they'd been ruled by a fraud. Is that her? Someone whispered. Sounds like it. Oh my God. Evelyn fumbled with her papers. This is fake. He's manipulating audio. Sophie stood up beside me, holding the legal documents high. We also have invoices, emails, and payment trails connecting your HOA funds to your brother-in-law's company. You used community money to pay for vandalism. Chaos erupted. People shouted. Some stood up. Others pulled out their phones to record. Jorge's booming voice cut through the noise. She sabotaged our security system. While kids sleep here. You call that leadership? Evelyn's composure shattered. She pointed at me, voice cracking. You think you've won, Nathan. You've got no idea what you've started. But she was wrong. I knew exactly what I'd started. And the countdown, the one she had triggered when she covered my panels, had just hit 0. The night after the meeting, chaos took root in Maple Ridge Estates. By sunrise, the once quiet neighborhood was buzzing with fear and fury. Someone had leaked the footage of Evelyn's recorded phone call, and it spread through local Facebook groups like wildfire. The same neighbors who used to nod politely at her morning jog now whispered her name with venom. For the first time in years, she wasn't the hunter, she was the hunted. But while the community digested her downfall, the real damage had already been done. The paint had hardened on my solar panels into a chalky crust that made restoration nearly impossible. I had the manufacturer on the phone that morning, and their verdict hit me like a hammer. The industrial solvent she used had corroded the protective glass layer. Every panel would need replacing. $30,000 gone in a single night. Insurance was slow. The police even slower. The officer who filed my report dropped by, again taking notes like it was a formality. We'll keep this on record, Mr. Cole, he said, eyes dull. But unless we have direct proof she ordered it done, I cut him off. I do have proof. I pointed at the paused frame on my laptop, Evelyn's face in her garage, voice commanding the painters to cover my roof. That's direct enough. He sighed. Maybe. But you'll need an attorney to push this further. Civil vandalism cases take time. That's when Sophie stepped in. She'd already filed a formal complaint to the Colorado State Attorney's Office and copied the Department of Regulatory Agencies. We're not just dealing with vandalism, she told the officer. We're looking at fraud, embezzlement, and property manipulation under HOA authority. The moment Summit Vista Development enters the picture, this becomes criminal. Her tone made even the cop straighten. Ma'am, he said carefully, I'll forward this to Detective Johnson's unit. He handles organized property crimes. After he left, Sophie and I looked at each other in grim satisfaction. We're finally in motion, she said. Still, something didn't sit right. Evelyn had always been calculating, but that night at the meeting when her voice cracked and she lost control, I'd seen something deeper than arrogance. Desperation. She wasn't just afraid of losing power. She was afraid of exposure. Whatever she'd built with Summit Vista went deeper than a few shady home sales. Jorge arrived later that evening carrying a duffel bag, not of weapons but of evidence. Found these in the HOA storage shed, he said, dumping binders and receipts across my table. Most are financial records. Looks like someone forgot to shred the good stuff. He was right. Hidden between invoices for landscaping and maintenance were several payments from a company named Golden Falcon Investments, LLC, another Summit Vista shell. Transfers totaled over $150, 0 inches, the last 18 months, all labeled consulting services. The payee Pierce. Jesus, Sophie muttered. She wasn't even subtle. I scrolled through the records, pulse quickening. One document stood out, an email confirmation sent to Harold Pierce's law firm for drafting expedited transfer contracts. Attached were drafts of homeowner agreements pre-filled with addresses of families that had violated HOA standards. Evelyn had been preparing to push people out before they even received citations. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it settling in. Then Jorge broke it. "We've got everything we need to bury her." "Not yet," I said. "We need a clean delivery. If we give this to the police now, she'll lawyer up and spin it as a vendetta. But if we expose her publicly, she's finished." Sophie grinned. "You're thinking like a prosecutor." That's when the first break-in happened. It was just after 2 a.m. The alert buzzed on my phone motion, detected at the corner of Maple and Sycamore. I switched to live feed, nothing but static. The cameras had finally died. The battery backups were exhausted. My countdown timer hit 0:00:00:00. 15 minutes later, Jorge was banging on my door. "Nathan, the Reynolds house. Someone smashed the back door." We ran across the street. The place was empty, no one hurt, but drawers were open, electronics gone. Whoever did it knew exactly where to look. Within 2 hours, there were reports of 3 more burglaries on the same street. The irony was cruel. Evelyn's sabotage had crippled the security system she'd claimed to protect. By dawn, police cruisers lined the block, their red-blue lights painting the manicured lawns in accusation. Detective Johnson himself showed up, a tall, broad man with a receding hairline and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Cole," he said, shaking my hand. "I've read the reports. You've got one hell of a situation here." I told him everything from the vandalism to the shady financials to Evelyn's phone call. He listened occasionally, jotting notes. When I finished, he nodded toward Sophie. "You're the lawyer, right? You've got the payment trails." "Yes," she said, handing him a drive, "and video evidence, plus witness statements." He plugged it into his laptop, scanning through files. Then his brow furrowed. "You said Summit Vista Development. They've come up in 3 other complaints this year. Different cities, same MO. HOA, pressure property devaluation, quick redevelopment. You might have just cracked something bigger than this neighborhood." I couldn't help the grim smile. Good. She deserves the spotlight. But Evelyn wasn't done yet. That afternoon, she called an emergency HOA meeting at the community center, spinning the narrative faster than we could keep up. "These break-ins," she declared to the packed room, "are a direct result of one man's reckless tampering with our security infrastructure." I stood at the back, arms crossed. She was still wearing that mask of authority, pretending the chaos wasn't of her making. "The only tampering I called out was you ordering your brother-in-law to destroy the panels that powered the system." Her head snapped toward me. "You have no proof." "Oh, but I do." I stepped forward, projecting the security diagram I'd presented before this time, with in addition a blinking timer showing system failure in progress. "You shut down the power source. Every camera outage is time-stamped within an hour of your vandalism order." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then Sophie took over, her voice clear and commanding. "We also have financial evidence of Mrs. Pierce embezzling HOA funds and collaborating with Summit Vista Development to acquire devalued homes. This isn't negligence, it's conspiracy." Evelyn's mask slipped. Her voice cracked. "This is slander, you'll all regret this." But Detective Johnson had already entered the room, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. He raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "Mrs. Pierce, I'd like you to come with us to answer a few questions about these transactions." Her eyes darted wildly from me to Sophie to the officers. "You can't do this. I'm the HOA president," Johnson smiled faintly. "Not anymore." As they led her out, cameras flashed, phones recorded, and the room erupted in a storm of whispers. For the first time in 8 years, Maple Ridge Estates felt free. Still, as the door closed behind her, a thought nagged at me. She'd said earlier, "You have no idea what you've started." And she was right. Because Evelyn Pierce might have fallen, but the machine she'd built was still running. The morning after Evelyn's arrest, the neighborhood looked like a film set after the director yelled, "Cut." The police cars were gone, the crowd dispersed, but the residue of chaos still clung to Maple Ridge Estates like smoke after a fire. The HOA office was sealed with yellow tape, its glass door cracked from where one of Evelyn's loyalists had slammed it in a fit of panic. For the first time in 8 years, the Queen of Control had been dethroned. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were only halfway through the story. Detective Johnson came by that afternoon, his notebook thick with scribbles. "We're processing the financial data you provided," he said. "Preliminary findings confirm that over $200,000 were laundered through the HOA's maintenance accounts." He flipped a page and tapped his pen. "There's more." We found encrypted emails on Harold Pierce's laptop connecting the HOA fund transfers directly to Summit Vista's project called Phase 2 Acquisition. I leaned back in my chair, cold anger spreading through me. Phase 2 Johnson nodded. According to the emails, Phase 2 involved artificially lowering neighborhood desirability through fear, security failures, vandalism, even staged break-ins to force property sales under market value. So the burglaries weren't random, I said quietly. He met my eyes. No, they weren't. They were planned. I felt the blood drain from my face. Planned by her. He closed his notebook. By her and others. Evelyn was a cog in something much larger. We think Summit Vista has been running this scheme across 3 states. And now that she's in custody, they're cleaning up loose ends. Loose ends. That phrase hung in the air like gunpowder. That evening, Sophie and I met in my home office to organize the digital files for the case. My laptop glowed with open spreadsheets, chain of custody receipts, and financial graphs linking names, dates, and invoices. She looked exhausted but determined. Johnson's right, she said. Evelyn's arrest isn't the end. It's a trigger. Whoever's behind Summit Vista won't let this die quietly. I rubbed my temples. Then we make sure it doesn't. We expose everything publicly. Sophie gave a tired smile. Careful, Nathan. You're starting to sound like me. Outside, the wind howled through the pines. For a brief second, I thought I saw headlights pause at the end of my driveway, just long enough to notice me at the window before rolling away. The next morning, the HOA forum exploded with panic. Overnight, 3 more houses had been burglarized, one belonging to an elderly couple who'd supported Evelyn. The thieves hadn't taken much, just computers and documents. But every stolen item had something in common: HOA paperwork. It was as if someone was erasing evidence. Jorge called me just after dawn. They hit the Petersons, he said. Took every HOA file they had, even the old newsletters. This isn't random. I know, I replied, staring at my monitor. They're cleaning house. By mid-morning, the neighborhood was in full revolt. Residents crowded outside the community center demanding answers. Without Evelyn, the HOA board was headless, and the bylaws required an interim president. The vote was nearly unanimous. They wanted me to take over until new elections could be held. I didn't want the job, but someone had to stop the bleeding. At the first meeting under my leadership, the tension was palpable. People wanted accountability, safety, and closure. The first order of business I announced is transparency. Starting tonight, every HOA financial document, every expense, every policy will be published online. No more secrecy. The applause was brief but genuine. It felt strange, liberating even to see neighbors who once distrusted each other nodding in agreement. For the first time since moving here, Maple Ridge felt like a community. Still, the shadow of Summit Vista loomed. That afternoon, Johnson called again. Brace yourself, he said. We got access to Evelyn's private email server. There's a message she sent 3 days before her arrest, subject line, Phase 2 Initiate. It lists 10 properties in Maple Ridge, yours included. What's Phase 2 supposed to be? His answer came flat and cold. Burn it all down. Not literally, but financially. Foreclosures, lawsuits, credit sabotage, any method to make homeowners desperate to sell. I clenched my fists. So even from behind bars, she started a chain reaction. Johnson hesitated. Mr. Cole, be careful. You're the face of resistance now. That makes you a target. He wasn't exaggerating. That night, my inbox flooded with anonymous emails, empty subjects, random numbers for senders. But when I opened one, my blood ran cold. It contained a photo of my house taken from the street. Under it, a single sentence. Nice panels. Shame if something happened again. I called Johnson, immediately forwarding everything. They're watching me. Then we watch them back, he said. With Sophie's help, I installed a full forensic tracking suite across my system's IP loggers, decoy emails, and motion-triggered alerts. Jorge coordinated with a few trusted veterans in the neighborhood to form what we jokingly called Maple Watch. We patrolled the streets in pairs, flashlights cutting through the fog. 3 nights later, we caught a break. One of the volunteers spotted a dark SUV parked near Evelyn's mansion, abandoned but recently used. Inside were blueprints of the neighborhood marked with red X's over specific homes, mine included. At the bottom of the page was a signature block, Summit Vista Field Division. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was war. By the time Johnson's team arrived, the SUV had been wiped clean of prints, but the documents were enough to escalate the case to the FBI. Sophie coordinated directly with the federal prosecutors while I focused on keeping the residents safe. The FBI's arrival sent shockwaves through the community news vans lined the streets, reporters swarming anyone willing to talk. Through it all, I kept working on one thing: rebuilding the power system. I ordered replacement panels, upgraded the inverters, and installed a triple redundancy protocol so no single sabotage could ever cripple the network again. Jorge and his son Liam helped every evening soldering wires under the porch lights. It felt almost poetic, undoing Evelyn's destruction piece by piece. The day we switched the new system online, the hum of power returned. Cameras blinked green. The neighborhood was alive again. That night, as I stood under the faint glow of my restored array, Jorge handed me a beer and clapped me on the shoulder. "You realize, Hermano, you just turned her weapon into your armor," I smiled faintly. "No, we did." But even as the power lights shimmered back to life, my phone buzzed with a new text. "Unknown number. You may have won the street, but Summit Vista owns the map." I looked out at the rows of peaceful houses, the warm lights flickering inside, the sound of children playing in the distance. The war wasn't over. It was only evolving. The following week felt like living in a thriller I hadn't agreed to star in. The neighborhood was on edge. Every unfamiliar car drew stares, every flickering light was a potential threat. Maple Ridge Estates, once an idyllic suburb built on promises of safety, now resembled a containment zone, its residents patrolling their own streets, while the FBI mapped financial trails leading to a faceless empire. Evelyn Pierce was gone, locked away, pending trial on charges of fraud, vandalism, and racketeering. Yet her shadow stretched long. She might have been the queen who fell, but the crown she wore belonged to someone far more dangerous: Summit Vista Development. I realized it one night when I was combing through recovered HOA emails from Evelyn's personal cloud. Most of them were the petty power trip kind fines for garbage cans, left out lectures about aesthetic cohesion, until I found one thread marked Phase 3 Integration Plan. The sender's domain wasn't Summit Vista. It was Solterra Holdings, a name I hadn't seen before. The email's tone was curt and clinical. Upon completion of Phase 2 liquidation via devaluation, proceed with media narrative control. Establish HOA instability as cause of property decline to justify corporate acquisition. Ensure local leadership appears complicit. Do not leave digital residue. Attached were drafts of fake press statements blaming me, the rogue homeowner, for the community's collapse. Solterra Holdings planned to buy the entire neighborhood through bankruptcy auctions, rebrand it, and market it as an exclusive eco-living complex. My stomach turned cold. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about erasing evidence, rewriting the story before anyone could expose them. Sophie was the first person I called. She listened in silence, the click of her keyboard echoing through the speaker. "Solterra's not just a front," she said, finally. "It's an umbrella corporation. They own Summit Vista. They're behind several real estate redevelopment cases across multiple states. And Nathan, they're big, like multi-million-dollar big." "Then we hit them where it hurts," I said. "Public exposure." She hesitated. "That could make you a target again." I stared out my window at the rows of glowing homes, the people who'd stood by me through chaos and lies. "Maybe, but I'm already a target." We decided to coordinate with Detective Johnson and the FBI field agents handling the case. They needed digital evidence, timestamps, metadata, server logs that could prove Solterra's involvement beyond Evelyn's petty corruption. I offered to assist in the technical recovery. It felt strange sitting in a small conference room surrounded by federal agents, my neighborhood scandal suddenly part of a federal RICO investigation. Agent Morales, a wiry man with sharp eyes, handed me a hard drive. We traced several data packets from Evelyn's laptop to a relay node outside Denver. "If you can recover the headers, we might connect it to Solterra's servers." "Give me 12 hours, I said. Back in my home office, I worked nonstop. The whir of the cooling fan mixed with the rustle of papers as Sophie drafted legal filings beside me. At 3:17 a.m., the trace broke open. Hidden behind layers of proxy rerouting was a direct IP link to a Solterra domain labeled SV Opcenter 02, US East. I'd just found the control node coordinating every phase plan. I sent the data to Morales with one line: "Found your ghost." By sunrise, Johnson called. "We're moving on it," he said. "You might have just exposed one of the largest property rackets in the state." It should have felt like victory, but part of me knew the fight wasn't finished, and I was right. That afternoon, as the FBI prepared search warrants, someone tried to breach my home network. My monitors flashed red, unauthorized access attempt from an encrypted external IP. They weren't probing aimlessly. They were going after my local storage, the drive containing every file we'd compiled. I locked everything down, yanking the network cable, switching to offline mode. 30 seconds later, a white sedan idled in front of my house before pulling away. Coincidence, maybe, but I'd stopped believing in those. Jorge came running when he saw my lights flicker through the blinds. Everything okay, almost I said, heart still pounding. They're trying to erase the evidence remotely. Then we keep backups off-site, he said. I've got a military-grade storage drive at my place. Let them come for ghosts. That night, Maple Ridge stood united again. Neighbors volunteered to guard every street. Sophie stayed at my place, turning my dining table into a command center of laptops and legal pads. For once, we weren't just surviving Evelyn's madness, we were dismantling the monster that had built her. 3 days later, it all came crashing down, this time in our favor. The FBI raided Solterra Holdings' Denver headquarters at dawn. The news hit national networks. Before noon, federal agents bust HOA-based real estate scheme, multi-state fraud exposed. Evelyn's smug mugshot flashed again on the screen, this time joined by executives in suits and glossy office photos of Summit Vista. But the real poetic justice came when Detective Johnson, stopped by that evening exhaustion, lining his face, but triumph shining in his eyes. "You did it," he said simply. "Your network trace confirmed the connection. Evelyn's emails, your logs, the invoices together, they built the timeline we needed. Solterra's top brass are facing indictments for racketeering, wire fraud, and conspiracy. It's over." I looked around at my living room, at Sophie half asleep on the couch, at Jorge outside, talking to neighbors under the warm glow of porch lights. "It's not over," I said quietly. "It's just repaired." He smiled. "Fair enough. But for what it's worth, Mr. Cole, you turned a suburban HOA nightmare into a federal win. That's one for the books." After he left, I stood in my backyard, staring up at the restored panels gleaming under the moonlight. The paint was gone, replaced by a new sheen, a symbol of resilience. The cameras blinked steady green across the street, silent sentinels guarding a community reborn. Sophie joined me, arms crossed, her expression softer than usual. "You realize," she said, "people are already talking about you like some kind of local hero." I chuckled. "Heroes don't spend 3 weeks arguing about electrical permits." She smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but they do stand up when no one else will." For the first time in months, the night felt quiet again, not like silence before a storm, but peace after one. Still, a part of me couldn't rest. As I packed away the last of the evidence drives, my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. Only 3 words: Phase 4 incoming. My blood ran cold. Solterra might have fallen, but empires rarely die cleanly, and somewhere beyond the comfort of our glowing streetlights, another storm was already forming. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at my desk, the glow from my monitor flickering across the room while that message, Phase 4 incoming, burned like a silent alarm in my mind. Every instinct I'd honed from years in cybersecurity told me this wasn't a bluff. Someone somewhere still had a stake in Maple Ridge Estates. And now that the FBI had gutted their operation, they were going to tie up their final thread, me. At 2:11 a.m., I checked the network logs again. Nothing. No intrusions, no pings, no traces of movement. But outside, through the blinds, I saw the faint red blink of a taillight at the end of the street. The same white sedan. Same time, same place. I didn't call the police this time. They'd dismiss it as paranoia. Instead, I powered up the thermal drone I kept for surveying the solar installations. As the feed came online, the screen showed a human silhouette crouched beside the sedan's passenger door, heat signature bright movement subtle, watching. I let the drone hover above the rooftops, its camera silently tracking the vehicle. The figure finally noticed, looked up, then bolted inside the car. It sped away before I could catch the plate number. By morning, the world outside seemed deceptively calm. Children waiting for the school bus, joggers with coffee thermoses, delivery trucks rumbling past. Maple Ridge had gone back to pretending nothing had happened. But inside my house, the paranoia had a pulse. I called Sophie first thing. She arrived 20 minutes later, hair tied back, still in her blazer from the previous night. "You think Solterra's still operating?" I don't think I said. "I know. They're sending messages through encrypted networks. Look at this header." I pointed at my screen. The metadata of the message traced back to a temporary server in Miami, a known relay site used by shell corporations. "They want to rattle me. Or they're preparing another move." Sophie folded her arms. "We should tell Johnson. He'll escalate it to the bureau again," I said, "but by the time they react, whatever's coming will already hit." She sighed. "So what's the plan?" I looked out the window toward my repaired panels. "We build a failsafe." That afternoon, Jorge and I got to work. We rerouted the power grid, installed off-site data relays, and set up physical backups in 3 separate houses, redundant copies of every piece of evidence, and every HOA record now protected by multiple homeowners. If someone came for one of us, the rest could still expose them. Maple Ridge wasn't a cluster of isolated homes anymore. It was a network wired together like armor. As we worked, neighbors drifted over to help. The same people who once hid behind curtains when Evelyn knocked were now hauling cables and connecting routers. There was a quiet pride in their movements, a sense that the nightmare had turned into a mission. By sundown, the whole community center had been transformed. The once stuffy room where Evelyn had lectured us about aesthetic harmony now thrummed with energy. Kids handed out bottled water while retirees labeled wires and mounted floodlights. Sophie stood at the front, organizing everyone like a general. "No more secrets," she said firmly. "Every homeowner now has access to our network's security feed and financial dashboard. If Solterra tries anything, they'll be facing a neighborhood that knows everything." Her words sparked cheers, but I caught something in her tone, a tremor of fear beneath the resolve. We all knew this wasn't just about transparency anymore. It was about defense. 2 days later, I learned what Phase 4 meant. Detective Johnson showed up unannounced, his usual calm replaced with tension. "We just got word from the Bureau," he said. "There's a pending civil motion filed this morning in Denver County Court. A private entity is suing Maple Ridge Estates for breach of contract." Sophie frowned. "What contract?" He handed me the document. "According to this, your HOA board, under Evelyn's signature, entered a partnership agreement with Summit Vista for community redevelopment consulting. The kicker, it includes a clause transferring land use rights if the HOA is dissolved." I read the page twice, pulse quickening. "So if the HOA collapses, they get everything," Johnson finished grimly. "Every lot, every common area, even your easement property." Sophie's eyes widened. "But the HOA's been suspended since Evelyn's arrest." "That means it's in technical default," I said. "They're exploiting the gap in leadership." We all fell silent. The brilliance of it made me sick. Solterra didn't need to break into houses or sabotage cameras anymore. They could just win on paper. By evening, Sophie had filed an emergency injunction to freeze the lawsuit, but the corporate lawyers were relentless. News vans reappeared. Headlines read, "HOA Scandal Deepens Residents Face Eviction Amid Legal Battle." At the emergency town meeting that night, the room was overflowing. Faces I'd only ever seen behind blinds were there, furious and frightened. "They can't just take our homes," one woman shouted. I stepped up to the podium. "They can, if we let fear break us apart again." My voice echoed across the room. "Evelyn built this HOA to control us. Solterra is using it to erase us. But they can't touch what they don't own the truth. We prove this agreement was made under fraud, we win." Sophie followed me, calm but sharp. "I've already subpoenaed the original signatures. The notary record shows they were falsified. We can prove Evelyn didn't have the board's consent." Applause rippled through the crowd. For the first time since the nightmare began, hope didn't feel like a luxury, it felt like fuel. Still, that night, I barely slept. The wind outside carried the low hum of cicadas, and somewhere in the distance a car door slammed. I checked the window, nothing but shadows. I sat on the porch listening, waiting until my phone buzzed again. Another anonymous text. "Nice speech. Let's see how long your lights stay on." At that exact moment, the power across Maple Ridge flickered once, twice, and then everything went dark. I sprinted to my control hub. The grid had been hit with a targeted overload. Someone was feeding voltage spikes through the main transformer line. But my failsafe kicked in before the damage spread. The new array isolated itself, rerouting power to the backup nodes we'd installed. Within seconds, the lights blinked back on. Across the street, I could hear cheers and relieved laughter. The system held. Our defenses worked. But when I looked at my monitoring screen, I noticed one anomaly. A new device had connected to the network for less than a minute, then vanished. Its hostname read SV LegalOps 01. I leaned back, breath shallow. They weren't finished. They were watching our counterattack in real time. Sophie, standing beside me, saw the name on the screen and whispered, "What does that mean?" I stared at the blinking cursor, the log entry already archived, impossible to trace. "It means," I said slowly, "Phase 4 wasn't about lawsuits." She looked at me, eyes wide. Then what I exhaled. "It's about infiltration." Outside, the streetlights hummed back to life, bathing Maple Ridge in its familiar glow. Everything looked normal again. Peaceful, perfect. But I knew better. Somewhere within our network, our supposedly transparent, secure system, Solterra had already found a way in. And this time they weren't coming to destroy from the outside. They were already inside.